Welcome to EarthSayer Cinema, where we amplify the voices of people who care about life on Earth. Each week, we bring you conversations with visionary leaders, people driving change in sustainability and social impact. Our conversations are grounded in the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. From advancing human rights and gender equality to safeguarding our environment and building a more just and livable future for all. This interview is a follow-up of the screening of the documentary Mrs. Robinson. We're honored to share a special dialogue between Ronda Carnegie, co-founder and executive director of Project Dandelion, and Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland, co-founder of Project Dandelion, and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Together, they explore the themes of the film, the personal challenges and turning points in Mary's journey, and the broader lessons we can all carry forward. Let's dive in and enjoy this inspiring post-screening conversation.
Hi, I'm Ronda Carnegie, co-founder and executive director of Project Dandelion, and I'm here with Mary Robinson, who you all had a chance to spend time with, who's also co-founder of Project Dandelion, and so wonderful that you joined us for the film. So Mary, the film has just been shown, and this is really an opportunity to find out a little bit more about the film, how the film was made, and a little bit more about why you made this film with this particular filmmaker.
Well, I was very keen that it would be a woman who would be director of the film, but actually, initially I wasn't keen on the film at all because I was leading a more private life. I was able to do my global work outside Ireland and, be acknowledged in Ireland quietly, but not publicly, really, not visibly. And then my special advisor at the time said, "No, Mary, you've had a good life. You've done some, significant things. You've also made mistakes. We'll put those in as well." And people need to know. They need to know what women leaders do. So I said, "Grand." And I underestimated, because I honestly think she was right. We do need to know the past and what people struggle through and what women leaders try to achieve. And I hope that your young audience in San Francisco have appreciated that we had to battle our fights as you now have to work through yours. And what was interesting was the director, she really wanted to talk a lot about the women's angle on my presidency in particular. After all, I had thanked the women of Ireland who, instead of rocking the cradle, rocked the system. And she was aware that this took courage. Women went to vote for their president, deciding not to vote the same way as their husband for a change. That was courageous in those days. That was a real, breakthrough. And it was an honour and privilege, and especially humbling, actually, to receive that kind of support at the time. And I really tried very hard to live up to it.
So when you think about the way in which you tell the story, there is a chance to tell a story more in a heart space than in a head space. And this is something that you think about oftentimes.
Well, in particular, when we talk about the climate and nature crisis, it's complicated and it seems technical. So we have to talk about it in terms that people really understand and move them from the heart. Because unless people are moved from the heart, they're not going to change their behaviour or do what needs to be done. And that's, particularly important. And it helps to ground the whole conversation in saying, we're not separate from nature. We are nature. So we have to preserve the ecosystems that are part of how we will have a life in the future. And we have to link climate and health, for example, and talk about air pollution, talk about heat, talk about the people who die, women who can't give birth because it's too hot and their children die. And, all of these things are much more real to people than talking in terms of emissions and 1.5 degrees and, abstract concepts. So it's important to make it personal and to make it from the heart. And to be passionate about it, because I am.
So this is a particular time, especially for women right now. There's been so many pushbacks, specifically in the United States right now. And as you think about the role of being a women leader today, and just the film tells us so much about that story. How do you both reflect back on the story and project forward based on the story?
Well, I hope that the story actually brings out some hope, because the Ireland that I grew up in, despite my parents telling me I had the same opportunities as my brothers, Irish society wasn't telling me that. Women didn't have equality of any kind. It was very patriarchal. No divorce, no contraceptives. It was a very tough time, and we fought through that. So, the pushback that's happening in the United States, and indeed it's happening in other parts of the world, is very shocking. It's an unwinding of rights that have been guaranteed, and that's really hurtful. So that means dig deep. There's a fight to be had. Be prepared for it. Be prepared to say, we do not accept that this is the case. We are going to struggle, and we are going to win through, as other countries have, as Ireland did, opening up very rapidly, actually, for a country that had been dominated by a very Catholic Church patriarchy.
So this idea of speaking truth to power, where does that come from for you, and how do you think about how we can all think about that ourselves?
Well, I think I've never liked bullies, to be honest. And speaking truth to power tends to be speaking up to bullies. I did it when I was High Commissioner for Human Rights. In particular, my last year, which, believe it or not, my 5th year as High Commissioner started on the terrible attacks in the United States of 9/11. So I found that I had to be a voice criticising the United States at that time for failing to uphold its international obligations under the international covenants and treaties it had signed. The Convention Against Torture, for example, and it was torturing people in a way that wasn't acceptable, and I had to be that voice. It was tough, but I don't know, somehow now as an elder, Nelson Mandela told us when he brought us together in 2007, speak truth to power, reach out to those who are most marginalised, be their voice, help them to get their voice out, work hard for those who feel invisible in our world, who feel disadvantaged, and speak that truth to those in authority. And, it gets easier. Once you've done it, you realise it's important to do it.
Mary, you often talk about the next generation, the power of the next generation. And you even talked about this time when you were at Harvard and you saw sort of this youthful exuberance to the future. And just, I would love your thoughts on intergenerational thinking and mentoring, and just what is that interplay?
Well, certainly that year in Harvard, as is clear from the film, gave me a courage which my husband-to-be, who had a good sense of humour, called my Harvard humility. He meant the opposite, of course, to challenge and get elected to the Senate at the age of 25. But much more importantly, I learned how important it is to have intergenerational conversations. And as elders, we have a lot of conversations, and it's a very different story from when I was growing up. I loved my grandfather. I listened to his wisdom on justice, but I would never have thought of expressing my own thoughts. I just kept quiet and listened to him. Now, I have conversations with 14 or 15-year-old climate activists, and they tell me what they're doing. And it is amazing, using social media, and young people have different perspectives. We learn from that. And I love the saying of Kofi Annan. He said it over and over, and I repeat it now over and over. You are never too young to lead, and you are never too old to learn. I love that saying.
Well, I think that's a beautiful saying to end on. And one more thought. You often talk about the idea of hope. We need hope right now.
Yes, it is a time when we all need hope. And hope is that relationship with the other. It's communities. Communities build trust. Women's networks build trusts. That's very important, where we have so much fake news and so much misogyny and so much, attacks anonymously by bullies who use the anonymous way of attacking because they're bullies. All of that. So what we need to do is to have that hope. And I learned a wonderful way of expressing that through Archbishop Tutu, who was the first chair of the elders, a wonderful man. He always spoke from the heart. And I was on a panel with him years ago in front of young people, and he was accused of being an optimist. And he said, "Oh no, I'm not an optimist. I'm a prisoner of hope." And I think we all have to be prisoners of hope in this difficult time. Hold on to what we believe in. Know that all the things that are important, rule of law, human rights, these are all lasting beyond the current crisis. They are what will guide us into the future. Yes, we have to modify our systems and become smarter and become different. That's, I'm in favor of multilateral cooperation, but I'm not wooed to the current system. It needs a lot of modification, a lot of change. I'm all for that. We need to hear from young people about that change. But we need to be prisoners of hope, prisoners of solutions to our problems, prisoners of looking forward, prisoners of remembering the way Nelson Mandela put it, it always seems impossible until it is done. And what we have to do is hold on to that and do it to the best we can.
Well, Mary, thank you for joining us for this conversation, and thank you for all joining us for the viewing of the film. And we look forward to hearing about the many conversations that you have. And thank you again.
Thank you.